across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to a brand new season of Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this February 25th, 2025. Well, tonight is our first episode, Open Lines, Open Topics. We specifically chose this, not just because you all love this one so much, but because we knew that we were going to have a lot of problems getting this show started and this whole season started. Over the break, the computer that runs this show crashed and the entire hard drive was destroyed. Even the backups on the cloud were lost. Everything. It was a complete disaster and I had to rebuild it from scratch. We're back, sort of, but I'll tell you more about it when we return. Don't go away.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all having a wonderful evening. I'm glad to be here with you tonight. Once again, I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Willett. A bit frustrated Bishop Bryan Willett, but I am absolutely here. And I am also here with my wonderful co-host, Jamie Wolfe. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing good. The Brooklotic will taste real good in a second.
Yes,
you deserve it.
Our liturgical libations tonight is the Brooklotic 18-year-old unpeated Scotch from Isla.
Thank God.
And it's a good one.
Yeah.
Actually, it was actually rated one of the top five, I think, for the year. If I'm not mistaken, it's a good one. We'll give it a taste in a second. But first, I want to thank all of our serious reverb. Are we getting reverb? Too many mics. So once again, we're having some kind of strange mic issue.
That there's another.
It's this primary
gone on this one here too. Okay, it should go away now. I'll explain what this is. Is it better now? We might have to do this,
Lord Jesus,
several times. Okay, the intro was good, but now it's okay. Yeah, okay. So let me explain to you what happened here. Okay, so as I mentioned, over the break between seasons, we the whole hard drive crashed and all the backups crashed, and so I had to rebuild the show from scratch, not remembering all of the settings that we had initially. Well, they all went away. I had to rebuild them from memory, which, was done several years ago. And if you guys remember when we first started doing a video version of this podcast, we had to really do a lot of test runs. It was an absolute mess. A lot of you helped me with that, and I want to thank you all for that. But what ended up happening, unfortunately, was that in the process of rebuilding it, I wasn't able to get everything back the way that initially was. So I had to kind of recreate certain things. And some of the settings that were salvageable apparently changed with the new update, because all of the software, of course, has been updated since the last versions were being used. And, Riverboat Gambler is in the audience, I see. And I know how he feels about constantly having to fight against the new iOS with his wonderful casino game app that he has for iPhone and Android. But this is a very similar thing. They're always updating, and they're always changing things. They're changing interfaces. They're changing how things work. And look, I'm not a tech guy. All right. I'm a bishop. I didn't go to school to run a podcast. I'm not a broadcaster. I figure this all out because I'm clever, but that's about as good as it gets. Okay.
I can't help you either because I'm not computer savvy at all.
It's just a mess. So what ended up happening is some of the microphones that were set to the soundboard somehow got switched, or I guess auto connected to the computer or the camera, because they all have microphones too. And well, I guess that it just decided to play them all at the same time. So that's why you had that echo there. And that was incidentally the same reason why there was you could hear me during the pre-show, because the setting that was originally our microphone setting was changed to, I guess, another microphone, the built-in ones on the computer or something. And I had to set specifically the soundboard and rebuild that connection to the simulcasting software. I'm not going to bore you with any more of this, but it's just been a nightmare for me. So if I sound a little irritated over that little intro, you probably could figure out why. I mean, this has been an absolute mess. So yes, I'm trying to get everything working and up to par again, the way it used to be. On top of it all, if that wasn't, to add insult to injury, if that wasn't bad enough, Spreaker, which has been our podcasting software for ages now, I guess decided at some point between the last time we used it and now to no longer support live streaming. So there was no notification to me about this. There was no information about this, but I, of course, had to reinstall the studio software to be able to do the podcast. And so we're getting ready to go live. Everything's looking good except for the microphone issue, which we seem to have resolved. And now when I go over to the Spreaker studio to go live for the podcast, there's no option to go live. It's gone, completely gone.
Yeah, it was not there.
And so now I've had to use the Spreaker studio to record what we're doing right now. And thanks a lot, Spreaker, by the way. Maybe I need to get rid of you and find another service. I don't even know. But it looks like we can't be live on the audio only version now. Now that's going to have to be uploaded as a pre-recorded broadcast from the live that we do now on all of the other platforms. So we are, if all things are equal, it looks like we are live on, I haven't even checked Facebook. Let me just make sure everything's looking good, because I got completely derailed by everything. So it looks like we're live on Facebook. Okay.
I think everything else is good.
How is, by the way, the buffering? Is there buffering or is there glitching on the stream? Because YouTube's saying that our key frame rate frequency is 8.1 seconds and it needs to be 4 seconds or less. I don't even know what that means. I've never even seen that error before. I don't even know where you would go to change a key frame frequency. It says key frame frequency. I don't even know what that is. And so it's saying that it could cause buffering. It's saying we have a very poor stream health right now because of it. And I don't see anything wrong from my end. We're okay on Instagram, and I believe we are okay on TikTok. So
you just do what we did in the military when those idiot lights came on our Humvees.
Just ignore.
You just keep on going. You just ignore it, or you slap the dashboard until it goes off.
It's all good, he says. Yeah. Your lips are matching the audio right now on YouTube, and I'm casting. Okay, so it sounds like there's really not an issue. If something goes wrong, this is just YouTube that's telling me this. The other platforms seem to be fine. So I don't think it's really an issue. Let me just check one thing here, because this is something I usually do as well. I didn't put the announcement out here to the Nicolayan Network as well, and I like getting that on there too. So like I said, this was more of a test show than a season premiere, unfortunately. It's just the way it had to go, because, again, I had to build this from scratch, and I am not really a podcaster. I just pretend to be one. All right. I think that's good for now. I think so. We're good on the Nicolayan Network, too. All right. So let's go ahead and start this show. I think we can start this show now. I'm going to turn this. Yes, let's start with first let's start with thanking everyone who's joining us, our moderators who keep this show going behind the scenes.
Absolutely. This pours for you.
I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of you who support the church, which make this show possible. Let's not forget that this is a church-sponsored program. And the people that keep it going are actually usually better people than I am. So give them a big, internal round of applause for all of the wonderful things that they do to allow you all to enjoy this show, because it does not get the support that it needs, even though there is a big fat QR code there for donations, and there's a big website you could go to give a donation if you like the show. Very few of the audience actually does, but a small handful supports it and keeps it going, and supports the church that keeps it going. So we're grateful for them, and I wanted to give a big thank you for that. So liturgical libations, let's do this, and then we'll get the show on the road here. So this is the Brooklotic 18. Yes, this is a good one.
Oh, yes, I remember this.
Did you have it? I don't remember pouring it for you.
You had it, a little mini pour upstairs.
But we've never done it on the show.
No.
I didn't think so. I try to find things that...
You gave me a sneak peek after you got it.
Okay. I try to do things that we haven't featured before. But anyway, let me just check, make sure this is working here. What a weird thing. I mean, I don't understand why they would give up the live option. I'm going to have to check into that and find out what's going on. Okay, so joining us from the great country of Australia, we have Father Chris, all the way out there in the morning. It's still morning for you, right, Father?
It's 12:30.
Okay, so just turned noon.
Just
that's how late we are right now.
Yeah, it's broad daylight here, that's for sure. It's the center of the day.
Okay.
And I did, in fact, finish my libation. I mean, I've got my nice new, you probably can't see on the screen, my new little cups. Nice. Got a pheasant on them. A little bit of Old England.
Drinking some matcha.
And I'm drinking this ceremonial grade matcha. I work for a member of parliament, an independent member of parliament in Australia who is originally Vietnamese, and she's got me onto all of these
he's got the good stuff.
Southeast Asian goods, and so the matcha I'm quite a fan of. This is the rolled, pressed, dried, and powdered green tea, which actually is originally from China. But it's now associated with Japan because the first Qing emperor banned this in China, so it carried on in Japan.
That's actually quite interesting.
It's very good.
It's interesting.
It's very good.
All right, so what I'm going see, we're right now. Let me remove the spotlight. I'm hoping that this fixes the problem. Let me see. Right now, it's not switching over to the speaker like it's supposed to. It just seems like it. I don't know what it's doing right now. Let's see. Right now, it's showing us Brandon, who's all the way in Tennessee. How you doing, Brandon? Since you're the one that's on right now.
Bounced off Australia, came right back.
Oh my gosh! Like I said, we needed this as a test show, and I didn't want to have to go live and mess around with this because I needed everybody here to do it. So it's like, you know what? We're just going to go live. We're not going to have a guest for this show. We'll get to some good topics. We'll have a good show. It won't be a perfect show.
We'll do it live.
But right now, for some reason, even Zoom's not cooperating the way that it normally does. Let's see, follow. No, that doesn't work either. Okay. I'm going to have to mess around with this. I remember this being an issue. Last time there was some kind of of situation with how this works. So what I'm going to do right now, and the reason I don't like this is that Father Chris is slightly cut off. Because he's underneath where the chat is, but you can still see him.
We can still see him.
I can actually,
right
you know
now.
what I can do?
I can cope with that.
He's
Can
got
you
that
cope with
stoic
that?
smile going on.
What I can probably do is
I'll just bring my camera up a bit.
Yeah.
That might help.
I'm going to just make us a little bit smaller for right now. And then hopefully I can get this working again. Maybe during the break, I'll play around with it. Again, this is something I have to
There's no maybe.
figure
He will
out.
play with it during the break because he's got to figure it out.
Well, it drives me crazy.
I
You
know.
know, I mean, all this stuff drives me crazy. I am not a computer technician, and I resent having to be forced to be one. Honestly, it creates a great deal of resentment in me. It really does. More than you probably know. More than you probably know.
You could throw me a weapon from anywhere in the world, and I can figure out how to take it apart, put it together, function check, all that. But when it comes to computer stuff,
So imagine that you went through all this training to be military and law enforcement and knowing how to work with weapons and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And just imagine if they said, well, you can do all these things, but you have to run the database for the entire county on all of the all of the database for the law enforcement. Switchboards and everything that connects
I
the
ran
data.
into that too when I got put into evidence after I was hurt.
Well, then you kind of know how this feels. I mean, this is just like it's out of your paradigm. It's out of your realm of expertise, and it's worse because it's a live show. So there's no room to go back and be like, you know what?
That's why we have scotch.
Let's edit it out. It's just live. You got to deal with it. So it's a little frustrating, but anyway, I mean, and I worked so hard to get this to be a good one, and it's still, there was things that could not be controlled.
We gonna be all right. We keep on rolling.
All right. So, right now we're just going to have to do the split screens for right now, because for whatever reason, it's not showing you the speaker. It's just either showing you the person who's not talking or the person who is, but not the entire group switching over. So we'll have to figure out what's going on with that. Okay. So, let's get started, I guess, with questions from the ether. Brandon, I think that's probably the best way to just begin this.
Quite a few.
Yes, we do. We do.
It's been a few months, so.
We have a lot in the back order. So the first question is, what does it mean when Jesus talks about having to be like a child in order to enter heaven?
Well, I mean, that's pretty much saying that in order to become, and this is what we've talked about a lot on this show and in other places as well, we are to be made perfect as he is perfect. Nothing imperfect can enter into the kingdom of heaven, because if something imperfect were to enter into the kingdom of heaven, then the entire creation would fall all over again. That's exactly how we fell in the first place. We brought imperfection into the perfection of the kingdom. Make no mistake about it. Even though the Garden of Eden represents the physicality, the physical part of creation, and heaven and the kingdom of heaven represents the incorporeal parts. They were perfectly united as one, so they existed sort of together. God was completely present and revealed to Adam and Eve in a way that we have never experienced since the fall. But bringing when original sin occurred, we fell entirely from grace, and we damaged the universe, and it separated heaven and earth, so that now heaven is more mystery than apparent, and what we've got left is a world of imperfection. If we were to bring this imperfection back to the kingdom of heaven, you create this chain reaction of the fall all over again. So in order to prevent that from occurring, nothing imperfect can enter the kingdom of heaven, which means that anything that achieves to heaven, which we call salvation, we need to be made perfect. Now, that doesn't mean we need to die perfect. What it means is if we die with enough grace, then we will be perfected after the fact so that we can then enter into the kingdom. And that's what the church calls purgatory. That's essentially what it is. But we still need that perfection. And those who die in perfect grace don't need purgatory. They can enter into the kingdom directly because they are perfect. The grace makes them perfect. So that's kind of what Jesus is saying here, is that children represent, in this kind of allegory, children represent the perfection of the kingdom. There's innocence there. There's no malice, typically.
Unblemished.
Correct. And so to be like a child is to kind of be like, we need to return to that innocent perfection again. That's what's sort of required of us. So it's an allegory. Jesus isn't literally saying that you have to become like, a 5-year-old and stupid or ignorant or whatever. He's saying that we will have to be made perfect in that kind of made pure again, made whole again, made new again. It's kind of just a way of saying that.
There's a distinction also between because he says we have to become like children, but not but
not childish.
Being childlike and not childish, yeah. And so one of the features of a child in this image is that they're open-minded and that they're trusting. And open to being led by in this allegory, the Father. So it's about being open to being shaped and molded by the Father's will, not being childish, not having a temper tantrum. And also, it's connected to this idea of the rebirth that we receive when we come to God, which is why we have baptism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Your picture has completely frozen. We can hear you just fine, Father, but you are frozen.
Well, that's okay.
Okay. I don't know if you want to reset your video and see if that helps. It says that they're saying that you're echoing too. I am not hearing the echo, but then again, I'm not watching on the broadcast. It's actually a really good picture of you.
Yeah,
you froze in a good way.
I'm happy with that.
The thinking priest.
But you are absolutely frozen here. So, but we can. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Oh, now you're green. Now it's just a green screen. Now it's just a green screen.
Could just be the internet speed. I
don't know. Lots of
if
problems.
You can hear me then.
We can hear you. We can hear you. We just can't see you. Okay, well, we'll try to work on that. So that, I think, does that answer the question, Brandon? I think that's the kind of the best way to look at it is, it's an allegory for perfection.
So that answers the question pretty well.
All right.
So the second question, the various figures tossed around as an adversary to God, such as Mastema from Jubilees or Shemihaza from Enoch, are they just different names for the same figure, or are they different figures entirely?
Different figures. These are, completely different concepts that come out of antiquity that sort of found their way into some of the stories and legends that made up what became part of the biblical narrative. So, they're all different with different functions. Some are referring to rebellious angels that come out of that Enochian tradition, and then some have become with Satan. We've already talked a lot about in previous seasons about how Satan is really more of a title that sort of became morphed into the name, a proper name, but it didn't start out that way. But no, these are all different concepts. They're not the same thing with different names. It's different concepts.
Okay, because doing the research for my book, which is almost done, I was kind of having to juggle with if they were the same entity, just different names, or if they were from like various different cultures that just came together within the Bible and the Deuterocanonical books.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, the screen just messed up on me again. What did you say again? Can you repeat that again, Brandon? I'm sorry.
Pretty much doing the research for my book, I was wondering if these figures were entirely different from different cultures, or if they just kind of like molded together into one figure that we call Satan.
It's kind of a little bit of both. I think what you're dealing with is, of course, there's different encounters with evil, different ways in which evil could be experienced through people in different parts of time from their own various vantage points. And so that defines, I think, the starting point for how some of these ideas and concepts become the individual entities or personalities or characters that we then assign to them in the modern era. We're doing the same thing now. And I think you could argue that in another 1,000 years, 2,000 years of Christianity, there'll be a very different model again for how the church deals with evil or how it defines evil or speaks of evil. It's already starting to change. There's many places within the framework of Catholicism that no longer recognizes the devil as an actual fallen angel being in the sense that I think the church tends to reflect on that as it's more of an archetype of again, getting back to really the older Jewish Yetzirah concept. There's a lot of places within, I think, there's a lot of places within the overall biblical history where you see this happen. So it's kind of how the church, these things evolve organically. You were talking about on the network today, you had a question on the network, or was April, or you responded? I couldn't remember. Yeah, you had a question about this that was kind of similar to this. Wait a second. Father Chris is trying to come back in. Let's see if we can get him back in here. Sorry, I'm still a bit distracted. You're still green screen, Father. I don't know what's going on there. Let me unmute you. But I still don't have a picture for you.
No, I don't see one either on my end. So
it's definitely on your side, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, guess what?
I'll just keep playing around. You carry on.
All right. Let's do that. So, let's do this and see if this helps. I gotta figure this out here. It's so crazy. Okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry, everyone. But this is kind of a test run today.
I think it's at my end, not yours.
It is.
I might just have to restart my whole computer. So I will come back on the show in the next hour.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. That sounds good.
Speak soon.
All right.
Back.
Okay. So, does that answer the question, or did we? I know I got kind of sidelined there. So,
yes, I think you're mentioning the question I had asked about the history of worshiping God and how many people kind of see that he started off as a storm deity. Was that what you were referring to?
Yes. Oh, that's what it was. Yes, the storm deity thing. Theology evolves organically. Religion evolves organically. All religions today in the modern era can trace their origins back to some kind of or some form of animism. All right. And so you're going to have these variations that evolve into concepts as people become more enlightened. And it's kind of by design, by divine design, because God sort of reaches out to us and speaks to us and reveals himself to us in time in a very slow, methodical process. And so as that revelation occurs and we learn more about him, what happens is we try to apply our understanding of where we're at religiously or spiritually to those revelations. And it changes as the understanding of God changes. But that's natural. That's the way it's kind of supposed to be. So it's not a bad thing, even if it is a bit confusing, I think, for some people, but it's not a bad thing.
And I guess our third question for this segment, has to deal with archetypes. So if we create a relationship with the archetypes through the tarot deck, is the relationship always going to be there? Like even if we buy a new deck and consecrate or activate it?
Yes. I mean, because the relationship with the archetypes is not the deck. You're not having the relationship with a bunch of plastic cards or pieces of paper or something. Your relationship is with the archetypes, which is already built within your own psychology. You know, we already have a relationship with the archetypes. What we don't have is a foundational understanding of the archetypes.
So the cards are just like a tool to communicate?
Yes, it's a way of trying to, I think, it's a tool to make sense of the data and to make it, I think, consider it sort of like a rubric for understanding it.
Right.
It helps to break it down
Wrap our little brains
in a
around
way
it.
that makes it understandable by creating categories that can be learned and memorized and then understood. And then it sort of becomes an alphabet that allows you to speak the language. But, you know, the relationship's already there. It's already built within us. So I think to a certain degree, you know, it's important to realize that. But that's not to assume, though, that if you keep switching around from deck to deck, that you're going to get the same results from deck to deck. Because the relationship to the archetypes will definitely form around your categorical understanding of them. So if you learn on one deck, until you really learn on a new deck, the previous deck is probably going to be more effective for you in terms of archetypal communication, just because they are going to be the symbols that your brain more immediately responds to because that's what it knows. So it's kind of like, again, like different languages.
Or different dialects.
Different dialects. That's even better. Yeah. That's a better way to put it, because it is the same language. It's different dialect, though. So just because you know one dialect doesn't mean you're going to fully be fluent in another one. So you got to look at each of the cards, each of the different decks of tarot as different dialects of the archetypal language. And if you go to another deck, you're going to kind of have to learn that new dialect if you want to use it and get proficient with it. But you don't need, you know, the deck itself is not where the relationship is.
But so like the examples of the different like dialects, would that be between like the Crowley deck and the Rider-Waite as different dialects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because they do have a different way of approaching the same archetypes. And so it won't be exactly the same. And so a person that is very fluent in the Rider-Waite is not, and has never seen or touched Crowley's deck, will not be able to use Crowley as effectively as the Rider-Waite, since the Rider-Waite's what they know.
And so it is it's the Crowley deck that holds more of the symbolism than the Rider-Waite, correct?
I would say that it's a more symbolically provocative deck, which makes it far more, in my opinion, more effective. But there are people that will staunchly, absolutely disagree with that. You know, they'll just be like, absolutely not. I've tried to use it. James Ferreira, who's been on this show.
Depends on where you start.
It does. I think it does. But James, who's been on this show talking about the tarot before, has said he's tried to use the Crowley Thoth deck, and he just can't make a connection with it the same way that he does with some of the other ones. And he has a lot of different decks. He buys several kinds. He collects them. So, that's because what your brain has latched onto as far as the symbols that it understands these things to be, it's going to be the easier way to communicate. And it would rather use what it knows. And it's more comfortable using what it knows.
And a lot of the symbolism's the same, but it's interpreted through different styles of art.
Correct.
Which is what you taught us in class.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's exactly how it is. So yeah, you can, that's not to discourage one from using multiple decks if they, I do, but when I have very serious questions, I tend to stick to only the Crowley Thoth deck. It's the one that I can be most dependent upon. But if I want to play with ideas, I might use different ones depending, and I have different ones for different reasons, because I find that each deck also has a different personality. And that different personality can come through and perhaps better respond to certain things, certain types of questions than other things or other types of questions. Same thing when you're dealing with different oracles. Runes, for example, I Ching as another. These are all oracles that are ultimately using the same archetypes, perhaps not the same family of archetypes, like the same number of them. Obviously, there's not going to be 78 runes, but the same core archetypal patterns are still present there, just in a slightly different way. So that is also a different personality. So I tend to go to runes with certain issues. Father is back. It worked. Well, he doesn't have a mic though. Let me give him a microphone. Here we go. You are back. Yes. It's nice to see you again. Now, if I could only fix my problem. So your background is fuzzy. Do you want that? Do you want?
Yeah. I've just split it out because I'm in a different room. So,
I got you. Okay.
And the cats are going nuts behind me.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if that was like a problem or if that's something that you wanted, but I want you to be aware of it. Okay, good.
How's the volume? Because people were saying it was booming before. I changed it to. I've taken the input level down.
They were saying you were too loud.
Sound good to me.
Yeah, you sound great. And I mean, I didn't notice anything wrong on my end. And the sound, the visual sound detection here is showing you we're in the same range that we are. So I think we're okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't fixed my problem yet. We're still on split screen. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on with
I'll never fix all my problems.
I don't think any of us will.
By the time I fix a problem, there's like 5 new ones, so I never can catch up. I can never catch up.
Do you know what though? I was I'm sorry, I've come in the middle of you're in the middle of a thought, but when Jamie was talking about keeping on driving even with the warning lights on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd never drive anywhere in a publicly owned vehicle.
That's right.
But I was watching an old episode of NYPD Blue, and one of the detective comes in and he's covered in the ink from the typewriter. And I remember, like, the first cases I ever wrote were on a typewriter.
Oh yeah, with the carbon paper.
So we had issues with that as well. Yeah. Carbon paper in between.
Yep.
Yeah, 3 copies.
That's how I started off too.
So we had problems with that, and these are just the new version of ink all over your fingers, you know.
I had stock and whiteout.
Stock and whiteout.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I don't know if this is, let me try doing this and see if this helps a little bit. I think, this is okay. We
do have a fresh question in the chat.
Okay, what is it? Let's go for
Gambler.
it. Okay, what is it?
If you don't mind, Brandon.
No.
I think we answered all the questions from the ether.
Okay, we done? Okay.
I think we're done.
Yes.
He asked, is end of time something that will actually happen? And if it is there expectations that we will actually see it coming? Or will we always expect that another generation will experience it? Or is it going to be a, oh crap, it really happened experience?
Well, the end times is happening now. It's been happening for the last 2,000 years about. I mean, the end times started when Jesus ascended and the tongues of fire descended on the apostles, and the church, was completely empowered and formed. As soon as we entered into the church is the end time strategy. So we have been in the end times this entire time, which is why the apostles thought that Jesus might return in their lifetime, just like people today are convinced he's returning in theirs. The fact of the matter is, though, by the virtue of the way Christ operates and the way the theology explains the way he operates, the world, if you're talking about end times in terms of the world ending, which is, I think, what people really mean when they say that Jesus is going to come back and end the world. The world will not end as long as there's one person still worth saving. There's the whole point of existence is salvation. So it will not end until there's no one left to save. So either everybody gets saved or everybody that will be saved will get saved. And those who reject salvation. And if there's nobody left to save, then there is nothing left for this world to do, because this is the only reason why this world is given the grace to continue. Otherwise, he would have wiped it out by now. And that's looking at it from a linear perspective, saying that this is, specifically, from our vantage point, how
every
we
time
see
there's
things.
a global tragedy, there's always several groups that are like, "This is it,"
and that's been going on for
thousands.
that's been going on for the entire life of the church. They thought,
quit trying to predict what God's going to do.
In the Middle Ages, when we went from the year 999 to 1000, they thought that was the end.
Yeah,
they did. And just like we thought, Y2K was going to end us.
God.
Remember that one?
They made us all come in and work that night.
People are a superstitious bunch, and just because they're Christian doesn't make them less superstitious. And even if the church has teachings about not being superstitious, that doesn't stop them from being so. So,
when God's going to bring this about, we're going to know.
Yeah,
and
real quick,
if you're talking about the end, it will be over. It's not going to be something that you look for and you're like, maybe this is it. We're in end times, okay? So that's why the world is so chaotic. It's been chaotic for 2,000 years, though.
So get your house in order. It's urgent. Do it now.
It is. Okay, we'll talk more about this when we come back after the break. Don't go away.
like a hurricane to my heart, till it far away. See the lights on the other side. I'm going to get there and hope we will meet there. like a hurricane to my heart, till we're far away. See the lights on the other side. I'm going to get there and hope we will meet there.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark, Season 11, Episode 1. Maybe I should call this Episode 0 since it's such a test run. I still don't think we've gotten the video corrected, but I think the show is mostly on the road now. So we're getting into the good stuff. You can probably try calling in. We'll see if that even works. The number to call is 802-321-0073. That's 802-321-0073. You can also call us internationally for free on Skype. Just dial Eye of the Seer on Skype. Just call EYEOFTHESEER. And we'll bring you on. You can also, of course, ask your questions out throughout the various platforms, be it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Even Twitch, if you're there. I don't think there's anyone there, but we're there if you're not. Don't go away. The thing is, I'm going to have to go through each and every one of these and turn off that extra microphone. For some reason, I don't even know why it is there. But I don't use this view very often. It's only when I have something to show you up close that I put this one on. And there's also the solo one. There's probably a little echo there too, I bet. Yeah, I use these two for like showing you something up close if like I'm doing a visual aid or whatever. But they all have this other microphone set to, I think it's the computer. So I think that's what was going on before. We should be good. The only last one I have to do is the one for the closing screen. And I'll take care of that when we're at the end of the show. But I have not been able to figure out what's going on with why the speaker isn't coming up on screen. Can we see if I did that right, Father? Could you say something? I want to see if it switches over.
Yeah, I'm really lost for words.
It's not doing it. It's just not doing it. No. Let me try this. Remove all spotlight. Okay, now let's try it.
There it is.
All right, but now it's not. Now it's not putting us on. See, it's just Father Chris.
And his hair is perfect.
Yeah, it is.
Oh well,
as usual.
It just happens.
Even with me, I'll have an indent in my head when I take this thing off.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it does mess up your hair, doesn't it? Okay, so what we're going to do, we're all going all over the place now. What we're going to do is we're just going to keep it in this 3-person screen, and it's just going to have to be good, for the time being. It's the best I can do right now.
Speaking of my hair, by the way, it was funny. I can't remember her name. I wish I could because I was intrigued by her. The woman that was talking about astrology and that sort of thing, and
last
she was going through my chart. Yeah, and she said, "Oh, that would explain the hair." It's so funny because I think so little about it, but everywhere I've gone, people mention my hair, and even she couldn't resist it on the show. So I don't quite know what it is, but I hope it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's kind of.
It's a military style law enforcement cut. I think that's probably what they're talking about.
Yeah. It's got it's got some style to it, some direction.
It's not a high and tight, but it's easy. It's like a fade.
It's low maintenance.
Right.
It doesn't look it. I think that's probably what it is it doesn't look low maintenance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, Okay. This view's good. Well, your April is right. This is a good view for open lines, but honestly, I do prefer when we have guests that it can switch back and forth. So I don't know how to fix it, because everything that I have done to set it up should have worked, and it's.
I suspect because you had to change so many settings after Zoom was already live, and the one thing you can't reset is Zoom. I suspect that once you restart,
you think it'd be normal? Itself. It might be that. It might be that it just hasn't reset itself yet. So that's very, very possible. No. We'll just leave it alone. Unfortunately, the chat's going to sometimes write up in Brandon's face there. I can't fix that because.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
He's like, whatever.
You can see him. We're all here.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet that we haven't covered. So, Brandon, do you have any more?
Actually, I don't have a question, but we were discussing the end times before we left on break. And I think it was yesterday, one of the biblical scholars I watched was addressing a video where someone was claiming that Elon Musk was the Antichrist.
Of course.
For Christ's sake.
Everyone's the Antichrist. Anyone you don't like is the Antichrist. They've been playing this game for ages. I want to say Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist at one time. There were several others. Obviously, Donald Trump has taken that position. Obama's been the Antichrist a few times. Depends on, if you don't like them and they're in a position of power, or at least in the visual, right up in the front of everyone's visibility, then typically that's going to qualify you as the Antichrist.
I think we're right to laugh it off. I've even been
called the Antichrist. I've been called it. I
think we're right to laugh it off when it's just a political kind of, anyone I don't like is the Antichrist. But there is a serious undertone to this, which is the reason that people are so glib about using the term Antichrist on really what are on a eschatological scale trifling matters as to who is the president, what have you, is because of an actual fundamental lack of belief that there is such a concept, that these things are really serious, that there is a heaven and a hell, that there's a God. It's really because of a lack of belief and faith in those things that they're so quick to cast around terms like this. And many times it seems to be the people who claim the badge of religion, particularly evangelical Christians, but not just them, I don't want to just pick on them, that use these terms so lightly. And I think, if your faith was deeper, you wouldn't be so quick to use terms like that are actually very, very serious.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Most, though, when you really think about most of the reprehensible behavior of people that claim to be of faith, you can find that it's actually the result of a lack of faith. Right down to this once saved, always saved kind of notion. That's a lack of faith.
Big
honestly.
Lie. Yeah.
It really is. Think about it. Because if their faith was really genuine, they would understand that they have to work out their own salvation. But because it's not, they have to create fail-safes to feel comfortable, to feel good in the midst of what makes them truly uncomfortable deep down. I find that that's at the heart of a lot of people that get into some of these more radical versions of Christianity that give all of us a bad name. I'm very hard on evangelical Christianity in particular because I don't think there's ever been a branch of Christianity, if you can even call it a branch of Christianity. It's deviated so much, I'm not so sure it is anymore. But I would say that there's never been a branch that's done more damage to the faith than they have, because a lot of the reasons why people hate us so much today is not the things that you would typically think, like, being too, I don't know, too holier than thou and all these things that people associate with people of faith. It's really more along the lines of this really bad behavior, like, getting into people's faces, trying to shove the Bible down their throats, acting like you're so much better than the rest of it,
Well, there's a lack of humility.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
As simple as that.
Yeah, and that turns a lot of people off. And then when you look at how they do church, again, I'm not sure you can call it church, but they do. With the rock bands and the parties and the celebrations, it's like a nightclub in there. and again, it's all
it's actually denial of reality.
Absolutely, it is. And
real faith is a real engagement with the faith is messy. It's like anyone watching this show who's thinking, gosh, I really struggle and fight and I feel downcast and I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't think I have enough faith, I just want to say you're on the right lines.
Yeah, if you're not struggling, you're not getting the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
It's true.
And this kind of I'm at this, I'm in this euphoric state.
Yeah.
Look, there's nothing wrong with having periods of that. We all need a bit of that. I mean, I know Bishop Bryan, when you get the privilege of being at a solemn high mass, and even though we all know all masses are just as special, which is to say the summit of the Christian life, we know that, when there's a good organist and a decent choir, and everyone knows that the liturgy just flows, we feel the kind of euphoria of isn't this great, isn't this wonderful? It's a blessing. But actually, they're only the moments of basically, I don't know, those moments where we can just feel a bit encouraged, a pat on the back. But the most part of the Christian life, and not just the Christian life, any life of faith, is about persevering with difficulty. Yeah.
Struggle.
So if you're feeling like that, don't be discouraged. That's the norm. And we're all in the same boat if we take it seriously.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, I think Riverboat says we've come full circle to the last part of my question, his question, of course. We will always assume it's a problem for another generation, not a question, just an observation. But I think it's worth a comment, though. I'm not sure it's a problem. I think the way that we need to look at it is, look, whether or not the world ends in this dramatic way, and with this generation here is the one that will experience that, or whether or not it is something that happens, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 10,000, 100,000 years from now, is irrelevant to the fact that when you die, it's over for you. Okay, so the fact is
every generation will pass away.
Yes.
Every generation.
Everyone will, yes. So it doesn't really matter if you experience the end times. We still have to experience we still have to face death. Either way. That's the big lie of the rapture. Okay, is that they think that they get a get out of jail free card. They're better than Jesus, don't you know? Because Jesus had to die, but they don't. They don't have to die. So it's kind of, again, it's evangelical arrogance. It's lack of humility, as you said, Father. It's the same kind of thinking. But the fact is, no, we all have to face death, whether it be at the end of the world or whether it be individually in the natural course of one's life of 80, 90, 100 years or less. Okay. So it doesn't really matter, when the end of everything is, because when you die, it's the end for you. And if you're not prepared for that, well, that's where it becomes problematic. If you are prepared for that,
and as for those who try and predict it, even our Lord said, only the Father knows.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. The point that was being revealed,
anyone predicting it, just
I think the whole point to why Jesus revealed it was to let us know that there was a plan here, that there was purpose to all of this, that it wasn't just, misery for the sake of it, that there was actually a direction that was being followed. It was never given to us as some kind of prophecy that we need to kind of decode and figure out and see, well, was it this guy? Is that the Antichrist? Is this remember, there is no Antichrist. Anybody that acts contrary to the Christian life, anyone who acts contrary to the mind of Jesus is an Antichrist. In fact, in almost every place except for, I think, one in Scripture, maybe two. I think it's one, though. It's plural. It's used in a plural most of the time. Antichrists. There's no one Antichrist. That became associated, of course, with Revelation and the beast, and people thinking that Revelation was talking about some kind of encoded event that's going to happen at some time down the road, when it was something that was happening in their time. To be able to talk about the issues they were having with Rome without being considered treasonous. So they wrote in a code that only the other Christians would understand. Apocalyptic language was something that Jews would understand. Gentiles, not so much,
I think there are sort of two wrong visions that compete. And this is both inside and outside the church.
Mm-hmm.
One vision is the Edenic vision, that somehow we're going to return to Eden. Well, and that can seem appealing to people. Oh, there's no hunger and death, and you've got everything you need, and blah blah blah. But of course, you haven't got free will, in a sense, you're sort of like a hamster in a cage. So that's not true freedom, and that's why Eden was, the story of the book Genesis reveals to us why that Edenic state is not the way for human beings to have perfect freedom.
Mm-hmm.
The competing vision is the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus, the story of Sisyphus is that his only job is to roll a boulder up the hill, and then just watch it roll down again, and then roll a boulder up the hill,
mm-hmm.
which is a vision of hell, right?
Or running a church.
Well, exactly.
Or a podcast.
Yeah, and so who was the French philosopher that taught the myth of Sisyphus? Absurdist philosopher, I can't remember his name, but the Camus, Albert Camus. And of course his absurdist position is to say, well, we just have to imagine that Sisyphus is happy. This is the image of the sort of ultra secularists who, or people that reject God. The antidote to this in terms of the cross, the resurrection, the end times, is to say we're neither looking back to a time before there was any sacrifice, pain, or effort, nor to an unending misery of monotony until the sun goes supernova and we're all obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of those things are true. And the problem is that Western culture is caught between those two positions. You have the sort of polyamorous attitude of those who think that we've got some naive return to a naive Edenic state, but the majority who really are preaching a meaningless existence like that of Sisyphus. The Christian gospel says neither. We are in fact struggling, dragging the cross up the hill, sharing a burden which God overwhelmingly takes the yoke of in Christ, but that actually, far from being something to be dreaded, the fact that we're in the end times is the exciting fulfillment of that, because the challenge remains, and that when God decides to end time and we exist in the glory of heaven, it won't be like Eden. It's more like conquering Everest.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and we don't want it to be like Eden. Neither did God, which is what the happy fault is all about. It was set up really, I think, this way, because it's only now that we can come to know him freely, and to be able to have an intimacy by choice, whereas before, you don't really. It's like a child that doesn't have a choice as to who their parents are, or what's going to happen with their life. I mean, I would think, one of the things, being a Buddhist, back in my Buddhist days, the thing that bothered me the most about the religion and bothered me the most about the entire theology of Buddhism was the idea of reincarnation, in the sense that even if I don't have any recollection in any clear sense of anything that I've done before, just the idea of endlessly having to come back and relive and relearn and resuffer the same things that I've learned to avoid now. Like I've gotten pretty good at avoiding certain types of suffering. The thought of having to go back, or how about getting born into a family that abuses the hell out of you? Right. I mean, everybody's family has had problems. Mine had problems, but I can tell you, I didn't have to go through that as a child, thank God. And
you don't realize how blessed your childhood was until you talk to some people.
It's true.
And it's horrifying.
When you do the work we do, you find that so much can be traced back to these horrible experiences. And I'm just thinking, God, can you imagine that? You die in this life now, and then you're reborn with no memory of anything here, and very little that you can actually take with you except karma, as far as the Buddhist theology goes. And so if you didn't live a terribly good life, then you don't have a whole lot to look forward to come. And so you got all these problems that you have to learn to get around them all over again. I don't want to live this again. I mean, one time
I think that is an example of the myth of Sisyphus. I think that's exactly what that is.
It is. That's
you're just pushing that boulder back up the hill again.
It is hell. It really is a hell. So that was always very. I mean, and let's be clear, to Buddhists, it's hell too. I mean, the whole point is to get off samsara. There really isn't a heaven and hell in Buddhism. There's nirvana and samsara, and samsara is this, is endlessly doing this and making no progress, and nirvana is waking up so you never do this again. But that's kind of I guess it's heaven and hell in a way. It's not a complete different idea, but it seems quite horrific to have to live this again. I would not want to do it again. And like these New Agers that we sometimes have on the show that talk about reincarnation, and some these theosophists that we've had on, when they're like, oh, you made a soul contract,
and they think it's wonderful.
They do. They think it's great. It's like, no,
I think it's awful.
Buddhism thinks it's awful. You don't want to come back. But reincarnation is not a good thing, not even in the East. They're like, oh, you choose your life and you choose your parents. It's like, bullshit, you do. Bullshit, you do. I'm sorry. That's a bunch of crap, and no, there's no freaking way, because it's not even logical. But I'm not going to get into all that unless you guys want to get into that tonight. It is open lines, open topics, and whatever's on your mind. I guess I should put the phone number up on the screen. I kind of forget to do that. See, everything's just so. Oh, it's even gone. Look at that. It's gone. Look, there it is. It's gone. Let's see if I can get it back up. No, it's gone. Oh no, there it is. Now we got it. Okay, it's back. There you go. You can call the show if you want. If you want to talk to us tonight. I can't guarantee it will work. I mean, we're just winging it here. It took me years to get this down to something that was moderately functional, and then it was all just wiped away, just completely destroyed. So I apologize for the lack of professionalism tonight, and probably hearing me shout out a few vulgarities when I was trying to get it working. But that's the way I am, and I don't hide any of my reality, and neither should you. So that's the way it is. What do we got here? The Silent Mystic says, we are living this hell over and over again until we purify our mind and wake up. That's why we have deja vu, because of our past lives. The cycle of samsara is hell. Yeah, well, that is very much a Buddhist perspective. I think it's very accurately put in Buddhist terms, that yes, there is no hell in some kind of like place that one goes to be punished for sins. It's truly the drudgery of being trapped in the cycle of birth and rebirth, and having to live a existence of suffering until one learns to awaken from it. So I think there's beauty in that. And I wouldn't say that, heaven is too far from that. We don't really exactly understand existence, which next week, by the way, hope to get. We're going to be talking about theories, kind of a new series, theories of existence. And what we're going to be dealing with next week is the simulation theory, this concept in modern physics that suggests,
a lot of traction lately.
It has, because there's a lot of interesting parallels to virtual reality that I think not until we had the technology of virtual reality and the complex video games that we have now did we ever see the parallel. But it's definitely there. We're going to talk at length about that next week, and we're going to talk about the different theories and perhaps even more frighteningly so, the different possibilities or implications of what those theories might mean. So we're not going to get into that tonight. I want to save it for next week. But I do want to warn those of you who are, regular listeners and listen to every episode of this show, which I'm very much thankful for, greatly. So I will tell you. But I will say that if you are of a weaker sensibility, or if you are somebody that is struggling with things like faith, I would say to be very, very careful with watching that show next week, because you're going to, I think, run into some challenges, because we're going to definitely work outside of the paradigm of the Christian worldview next week. We're going to challenge ourselves to sort of think outside that box. We're not going to hide behind the safety of theology and say, well, our faith is we're going to put ahead of this. For the purposes of this exercise, we're going to immerse ourselves in the horrors that simulation theory kind of implies in many ways, because it is a kind of a horrific theory. Honestly, It's not a good theory. It does make you wonder, though, because there's so much clear evidence that something strange like that is going on. But we'll go into that next week. But just wanted to kind of warn you ahead of time, okay? Just want to warn you ahead of time so that there's no concern that, well, I just don't want you all to be, I don't want you all to be sidelined by it, because it's going to be a content that we're not typically presenting on this show in a way that we don't usually present it. But calling in from the 931 area code in Tennessee, we're hoping that you're on the air with us. Hello, how you doing?
I'm good. This is April.
April, well, thank you for calling in to do the test run. It sounds, I can hear you loud and clear. Can everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so April, do you have a question or comment or story?
I have all three.
Okay.
So it's kind of a hypothetical thing that me and Brandon have been talking about lately. We're going on Friday to an investigation at a bed and breakfast that is well known for being having a lot of paranormal activity.
Okay.
And it's been on several TV shows, but most recently it's been on Portals to Hell. And they were talking about let's see, there was they have a medium who comes on there. And on this particular show, she said there was an elemental with the name of Rohipashaw or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. And so they looked up that name and found out, like, from Sumerian or somewhere like that, there's a word that is similar to that means something related to money laundering. Well, we know from the history that there was a preacher who was at the church, like across the street, who hung himself because he got caught money laundering.
Okay.
So kind of my question or my theory or what we're wanting to try to investigate is, could that potentially be like a projection of either the preacher feeling guilty because of what he done, or because of the story and everybody else kind of thinking that's what happened?
It could be either or both. It could be a combination of both factors. If both are true, if people, well, let's put it this way. If it did happen, historically speaking, and people know it happened or believe it happened, and they're putting that into or projecting it into the situation there, then that is like a trifecta, really, of making it happen. But it doesn't necessarily even need to be historically true. If there's enough belief or legend around
egregore.
It creates an egregore that will ironically take on the name of, even sometimes literally the name of the very concept that it represents. And so if you're talking about money laundering as a concept, then this becomes, through the process of myth, a projection or a personification of money laundering itself. So it becomes literally a being that will represent itself this way, which for all intents and purposes, make no mistake about it, is absolutely a demon. That is a demon. And that's why sometimes demons that we encounter in the field actually do go by the names of the things that they represent, instead of any kind of like historical name or biblical name or something from some medieval grimoire, or even something that might have some kind of like meaning in Latin or Aramaic or something. I mean, like I've said so many times, We've had demons refer to themselves as lust. We've had demons refer to themselves as murder. We've had demons refer to themselves as pedophilia. I mean, that's not a name, but they become a projection of the action itself. And that can absolutely possess a person. And then that person becomes entangled with that pattern of archetypal energy, and then can start to carry out the misdeeds of whatever it is that it represents. So I think this sometimes happens when you hear these really weird and radical stories of this, like a woman that, you know, is like this great mother. Everyone says she was a great mom. And then all of a sudden she like drowns all her 3 kids in the bathtub, or puts them in the back of a car and then drives the car into the river. And, you know, I mean, these are things that actually happen. It's like, what on earth is going on there that would possess somebody that's been taking care of their young kids and everyone sees as a good mom, and you know, nothing, no red flags anywhere, no alarms, you know, ringing anywhere, and then all of a sudden they commit an act of murder. It's almost as if they indeed become possessed by some action of this very personified action, and it changes who they are for at least a period of time where they carry out that. And that, I think, is the reason why it is so important to be spiritually fortified within oneself and strengthened within oneself, so that foreign elements like this, the energy that's just out there in the ether that we can come in contact with, if we're weak, we could absorb. Whereas, you know, from a Christian vantage point, well, I'm going to give you an esoteric Christian vantage point, some of the properties that we take on in the Eucharist, some of that grace that we receive when we receive the body and blood of Christ, makes us like him. So we sort of absorb the archetype of Jesus, which is a very safe archetype to take on, a very protective archetype to take on, which repels some of these nastier things that we come in contact with. And that's literally the metaphysics of what protects us. That's actually the grace working, is that you literally change. And the Bible, I mean, doesn't even allude to that. It really basically says this when it says, you know, Philippians 2:5, let this mind be in you that is also in Christ Jesus. I've always remembered that, because that's literally taking on the archetype of Jesus, which changes your nature. And so eating consumption of the Eucharist changes your nature. You're taking his body and blood and making it your own, and that changes you. That's taking on the archetype of salvation, the archetype of perfection, which is a much better one than murder or pedophilia or something like that.
People that have been, you know, a lot of your serial killers or murderers of really heinous killings, a lot of times it comes from someone who's broken in some way, going through a trauma. They weren't able to deal with it. They have no support system. And, you know, I've been in an interview room with detectives on homicides, and a lot of it was domestic. And a lot of these folks were like, I saw red and I blacked out. I woke up and I was standing over with a knife. I mean, a lot of times, and you think that they're just saying that. No, yeah. I mean, there's something to it. Like, you can look in their eye and they're like, I really don't know what I did. Everything went black.
And see, that's the real scary thing about it, because that's the very scary thing about it, because what we end up thinking sometimes, I think, when you look at the horror movie films and all, you know, these exorcism films as a subgenre, that kind of makes it seem sort of dramatic and well, maybe even melodramatic, over the top, really, where you would look at this and say to yourself, well, this can't really be true. And it's like, no, it's actually the reality of it's much more horrifying, because I can give you the psychological dynamics that prove it.
I was just about to say, you know, this is exactly where psychology and spirituality cross over, you know, and also, you know, we believe that Christ is present in the Eucharist, in the liturgy of the Eucharist in several ways. Obviously, most profoundly, the way you've described, also present in the person of the priest, Altus Christus, and also present in the proclamation of the gospel, where we hear his words, and it's that interaction between, you know, our psychology gets shaped by that faith. And it's why, you know, I as you know, I'm a big promoter in religion. Be religious, not spiritual.
No,
right?
That's not
true. You know, or rather, be religiously spiritual. That's a better way of putting it.
That's a good way to put it.
Because
I don't think you can have one without the other.
I agree. Well, you can. Unfortunately, if you have spirituality without religion, then it's psychologically unstable by definition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, like you said, have that mind in you that is in Christ Jesus. In Philippians 2, it might be my favorite verse in the entire passage in the whole Bible. You know, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be exploited, but rather he emptied himself and became a slave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that word is kenosis, kenotic love, self-emptying.
Right.
And it's that interaction between, yes, our lives and our psychology with the mind of Christ, which comes to us through the mind of the church, actually, because those things are almost inseparable. And so that's the whole purpose of it. You know, if you're thinking, why do I do this boring thing every Sunday? First of all, it's not the best mindset to have, but actually this is why. And this is where, because I'm a big believer, as you know, in the value of psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors, and priests sit within that mode of being, because we're trying to engage spiritually in what leads to better ways of thinking, you know, more ordered ways of thinking. And yes, that benefits the person, but it also benefits, well, we would say the entire kingdom of heaven, but it certainly benefits the people around you in your life. And that's why it takes discipline, right?
Yeah.
And that, if people are thinking, why on earth do we have this sort of religious element in terms of, you know, going through the same things every week and doing this and that, you know, what's the point of it? That's the point of it, is to make sure you're anchored to the things that lead to a healthier way of thinking.
Thank you, James, for that like. We appreciate that on Facebook. James is watching us on Facebook. I agree with everything you just said. And I think that is a question that comes up. In fact, it came up in, it actually came up. April, are you still on with us?
I am.
April, you were asking in catechesis, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but I think it's kind of relevant to this conversation. You were asking about the meaning behind, because April is in our catechism classes that we're offering right now, and she asked about the rituals of the Mass and, you know, what they all mean. You know, why is it set up this way? And I was explaining to the class that, you know, it's a way of taking on the authenticity of not just reading the Bible or hearing about it from some preacher that's talking to you for 2 hours, but rather a way of actually experiencing it and living it together as one community, as one entity, as Christ intended it to be. And so, you know, instead of merely just praying a bunch of words, you know, you use your eyes to view the icons, and your eyes become a way of praying. You use your ears to pray when you're hearing the chants and the bells and the music and everything else. The nose is, yes, olfactory becomes a prayer when it smells the incense. Your sense of taste becomes a prayer when you receive the Eucharist and you taste the bread and the wine, as it's transubstantiated into the body and blood of Christ. Even your sense of touch is it becomes a prayer when you do the sign of peace and you make contact with the person next to you, whether you shake their hand or you embrace them, or even when you do the sign of the cross. These are physical ways of praying in a unified way. It's not about repetition. It's about taking the community into the realm of the divine together.
And you're doing the same thing that those before you were doing hundreds and thousands years ago.
That's such a good point that you bring up, Jamie, because it really does.
Traditional. It gives you. I can tell you,
it connects you to the past.
Protestant. I went to church, was confirmed in the Protestant church, but I never, ever felt the connection to Christ in a Protestant church as I had the first Mass I came to, even at the old house in Lenox.
Yes.
When you're when you receive that Eucharist, I don't know if it's placebo, whatever. I feel it. I can feel the surge of energy when it goes down my throat, and I say that prayer in silence. You can feel
because
it.
the whole church is there.
Yeah.
The whole
And the
church.
Protestant church,
all,
you're getting a little
that
wafer
was,
and some
is,
grape juice.
and will be.
Yeah, past, present, and future.
Yeah,
It's
you're
all
joining
connected.
everybody before you, with you, and in the future.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah. So
and the point is, when it comes to repetition, because repetition, like vain repetition, is the great catchphrase of, Protestants that oppose things like the rosary and what have you. Is repetition is impossible. You can't have the same moment again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there is no repetition. Yes, you may be doing something similar to what you've done many times before.
It's reinforcement.
Praying the rosary, I'm going to say the Ave Maria immediately following this Ave Maria, but that is a new one at a new moment in time and a new opportunity to love God. And the great example which Fulton Sheen gave was arguing with the Protestant. He said, have you got a wife? Yes. Do you love your wife? Yes. Have you told her you love her? Yes, I tell her every morning. Well, doesn't she find that repetitive? No, it's a new moment. And every time you say I love you, it means
it's reinforcement, not
a
repetition.
new moment.
And conversely, it also works in reverse of that, because it also represents the eternal moment of the eternal truth of something. So if when you tell your wife you love them and you do it repetitively, as it looks from moment to moment, or even new moments or whatever, it's also reinforcing that this is an eternal moment. That is just as real now as it was last time I did it. And it will be just as real next time I do it. It's the same condition that lives on through the moments. That's something that doesn't change. So you could almost look at it both ways, and it means the same thing, which is kind of how eternity works, And as I've said, I also told my catechumens this. I think this kind of is earth-shattering to people. But people are like, well, when we talk about the fallen universe, the universe is broken, because of sin. Like, what exactly is broken about it, other than the fact that we all suffer and die? Well, it's the fact that suffering and death are caused by the passing of moments. We go from the singular moment of wholeness, of the eternity of God, where there are no moments. There is no past, present, future. It's all one.
It's just there.
Always was, always will be. That's the Alpha, Omega. That's what that is. That's why we have these symbols throughout church, on vestments, everywhere. Okay. The moments, time is the broken universe. That is the fallen universe. Time is the fall. We shattered the universe. Why do demons refer to themselves in plural usually? Because they are fractured realities of a singular whole. Fallen angels.
And this is absolutely solid biblical teaching.
Absolutely.
Why is it when you leave Eden you have to age and die?
Yeah.
Well, because time enters in.
You're now you're now going through a moment.
You're subject to time.
Yeah, and those moments are actually breaking up. They're being further fractured, which is what causes entropy. It's not just, it's not holding together, because it's fracturing more and more each time. And don't believe me? Just talk to a biologist about cell division. Mm-hmm. Talk to a biologist about what causes aging. You know what causes aging, don't you? Your cells keep having to reproduce, and they don't do it as well as they did the previous time they did it. And as they continue to cell divide,
they get the pattern wrong.
It gets worse, and it starts to degrade. The same way, try it for yourself on a printer. All right, take a picture, a nice high definition picture, put it on a copy machine. Okay, take a copy of it, then take a copy of it, take a copy, and take the copy of it. Eventually, you're going to get just a broken up picture. If you do it enough times, you're not even going to be able to recognize what it was.
Or take a plate, throw it on the ground, watch it shatter into pieces, and then take a hammer, beat those pieces until it's dust, and you'll never know it was a plate.
No, exactly. So that's the fallen universe, and that's caused by time. If we were outside of time, if we were back in eternity, in the perfection of eternity, then these things can't break, because there's no passage of time for them to fall apart. And that's how it kind of works. And that's why, when people talk about heaven as a place where there's no sickness and death and there's only happiness, it's because these things are eternal. You don't lose it. It's like you gain the perfection of happiness, but it doesn't wear out. It's like you could be happy, but it's not going to last, right? You can be like, oh, I'm on vacation. I got 2 weeks off. I can go to Las Vegas and, we're going to have a really good time. But you know what? Because of the passage of time and the fracture of the universe into these moments, there will be a moment, I guarantee it, when you have to come back home and go back to work. And then your happiness is over. All right. You might look back and be like, that was a good time, but you can't experience it anymore until you do it again. And then you got to build up time to create more moments. And then one day you're dead. You can't do it anymore.
Because happiness is in fact time dependent.
It is.
That's why it's fleeting. Whereas joy is not. Joy is deeper than happiness.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
And that's what we're to work for. And proof of this, even if people don't accept the Christian gospel, is to say all of the most important things in life. I've said this before because it's just true, and it's not my idea. All the most important things in life are not temporal. Love, kindness, freedom, truth. They are things that are eternal. They're eternal principles because they're not. They are, like you said when you say you love your wife. You're going back to a principle which is beyond you. It's beyond time. Yeah. It's beyond anything else. So it's a perfect principle.
So to reel it back into the mass, so the order of the mass, or what was April's question, is that I think April's now gone, but April, to get back to that question, is that we are trying to experience what eternity is like by living a perfect moment every Sunday or every time you even go to Mass. I mean, you could live that perfect moment every day if you have a parish that's lucky enough to have daily Masses. That's falling to the wayside, I understand. I couldn't believe, I was looking at the church that I used to teach RCIA at when I was a seminarian. And when I went there, there were 5 priests in residence. Right now, there's only the pastor.
Wow.
That's it.
It's
massive rectory too. Big church, and he's there all by himself now. Nobody's interested in joining the church and continuing it on, and they don't see the value in it. They don't support it, and they just, it's again, even the church is subject to a type of entropy that we are expected to participate in to prevent. That's what preserves the church. It's not eternal by its own nature. It's eternal through us, and that's what the Christian obligation, why it's so important. Okay, this is a good stopping point. Let's take our next break here. When we come back, more your questions and more conversation about whatever might be on your mind. Don't go away.
atmosphere, charting the stratosphere. Yeah. I prayed for you, kept you near, in hopes you chase away my fears. I'm on my own, you made it so, and now I'm chasing nightmares. I used to run with you through the great big leaves, laugh at you when you laugh at me, hope for us because I believe the whole is just you and me. I thought you were the one for me, that's why I gave you everything, held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. You meant the world to me. You meant the world to me.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. This has been quite the season premiere, I think. But, you know, we're here, and we're having a good time, and it's a good conversation. Things are kind of under control. I really just see two problems that I need to figure out before the next show. I don't know quite how to do them, but we're going to figure it out. If anybody knows what a keyframe frequency is and how to change it, let me know, because I don't. I've never heard that before, but YouTube is giving me this message. It says we have a poor connection, but you guys are saying we're okay, so I don't know what's going on. It's lying, I guess. Also want to shout out to our 51 viewers on TikTok. Thank you for joining us, and I see super duper social worker is giving some commentary out there on the chat. We have not missed your comments. Thank you for what you have said there. Time is the fall. That's right. Yeah, time is the fall. Okay, we'll be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. April asked in the chat on YouTube a follow-up question: is there any advice for us as we try to determine if it is real? I don't know if I have any advice specifically because the fact that there is already such an established repetitive pattern of this experience amongst multiple observers is typically enough evidence to suggest that it's real. So it's not so much whether or not it's real because it's happening. But what you're trying to get to is, I think, is what you're asking is to determine if historically there was a money laundering situation there. That could be harder to figure out. But it really, at this point, doesn't matter if it's historical or not, because once it takes its framework into the form of a projection, whether it be an actual projection from history or a projection of people's expectation, it takes on its own life and it does its own thing, and it can become a force to reckon with, a genuine danger in a paranormal sense. So, I don't really worry myself about that. Once there's enough evidence to suggest that there's repeating patterns of something happening, then at that point, I don't really try to determine too much about whether or not we can trace it to history or if we can trace it to just people's expectation. As far as our purposes, it's the same. And I know that kind of breaks the paradigm a bit, because I think people think that it's only real if it happens in history, but that's not how the incorporeal world works. What's real is what you experience. That's what's real. Not necessarily whether or not it's something that happened in a historical context or in a tangible way.
That's not even that difficult to conceptualize.
Not really.
It's the old cliche, there's your story, my story, and there's the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's inhabiting that zone, because something happened in history which we might refer to in this instance as the truth, although it's not a deep truth, but we might say, well, that was the event, but then you've got how you interpreted it, understood it, and how I interpreted and understood it. That's a direct comparison.
Well, let's say, you can make it something even very simple, like take a child that has a favorite toy or stuffed animal or something, and if it gets lost or destroyed somehow, and you're like, oh, no big deal, we'll just buy another one like it, particularly if it's like a popular character or something, you can always get one, you can always find one. Go to eBay and get a replacement, the exact same thing. Someone's got it. It's not the same.
Nope.
And for the child, there's something different, but that's only the child's reality. You're not going to necessarily experience that unless you really kind of empathically connect to the child's feelings on this issue. But for most people, it's just a toy, just replace it with another one that's like it. But the child knows there's a difference there, because there is a difference there. For the child, there's a different reality present. And that is a reality. There's nothing historical or tangible about that. It just is what it is. And you can say, oh, it's just because the child became attached to that one thing. But why would it be that one thing? Why would it be just that one thing? If it truly is just a favorite character, then just get a replacement, right? But it doesn't work quite like that. That's kind of a crude example, but I think it gives you the general idea. Our realities are very much shaped by what's inside, not much less so on what's outside,
I think the thing for me in terms of what April was talking about was, according to this TV show or episode, it was talking about how an elemental was tied to it. And that's the part I'm still trying to figure out, is if, let's say, for example, there was money laundering, what does an elemental have to do with it?
Nothing.
I guess that's what we're trying to figure out.
Probably nothing. I don't know. The problem is, a lot of these things are going to be, of course, derived through like mediums and psychics and people that, experience something that's, as Father Firth said in the chat, even in the real world, what people believe becomes true.
Yep.
He's right. We do create our own realities, and I think psychics are really good at creating their own realities. Sometimes they really do. That's not to say that all psychic ability is nonsense, but I will say, it's a little bit malleable, a little bit more than malleable most of the time. And so the real challenge is not so much trying to determine, whether or not there's some elemental involved here, as much as it is just trying to determine what's the best solution, assuming there is, I only deal with paranormal problems from a resolution point of view. It's like, for me, it's like, how do I end this? So I go into every case I do. What do I need to do to end this? So determining whether or not something's like a wrathful spirit, some kind of actual demon, or, a thought form, or an elemental, is only to help me draft the most effective, efficient resolution to the disturbance.
Because that's why we get called there.
That right. I mean, I'm not a paranormal.
They don't call us there because they're happy with it.
Right. I'm not a paranormal investigator. I do paranormal investigation to get an idea as to what's going on, to be able to better draft a solution. But I mean, I'm there to draft a solution. Okay. So for me, the information about what the kind of event is only to come up with the best solution, because there are different ways to handle each one of those scenarios. An elemental does not respond as well to exorcism, whereas a demon does. Even a wrathful spirit does. And thought forms do, depending upon the kind of thought form. But elementals, no. Elementals are handled in much better ways than exorcism. Exorcism is just going to usually make it worse for a while.
We've had some pretty cool cases involving elementals too.
Yeah. So it's about this. It's about coming up with an idea to fix this, to create the best treatment plan. It's kind of like, being a doctor, and you determine that someone's got cancer, but you're not quite sure what kind of cancer it might be. What kind of cancer it is will help you create the best treatment for that cancer, rather than just going in and guessing and maybe making it worse. So this is no different. It's a type of, you're truly diagnosing. It's a diagnostic tool. And then once, you have an idea as to what it is. But see, I don't use psychics for that, and I don't depend upon what psychics or mediums tell me in this regard. I mean, if I happen to have one with me, I'll listen to them, and I'll try to weigh what they say with the rest of everything else that I have access to. But for me, I just look for the indicators. And the indicators are usually, once you get into the situation, clear eventually. They might not be clear at first. But once you get your feet wet and you start working a case, they start to, the walls that prevent you from seeing it break down. And then it becomes pretty clear, pretty fast, which kind of problem it is and how best to solve it. I personally don't like elemental cases because they are so, there's so much variation and they're so difficult to resolve. A lot of times the best solution is to just move. Most of the time it's really because that's the easiest way. That's the easiest one to fix. Because essentially what it comes down to is trying to create the best defense against what they can do. If they're low-level elementals, then essentially you might be able to pull it off. If they're of a higher caliber, then you're just going to be constantly fighting with this thing. And sometimes the best thing is to either move or find a way to make peace with it. And not try to, use the cross of Christ to drive it away, because they're not forces of evil. They're forces of disturbance, but they're not forces of evil. A child that's screaming in your ear on an airplane who's crying and doesn't want to be there is a disturbance to you. That doesn't mean the baby's evil.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does.
Well, it's an evil experience for you, but
closed tube, you're trapped in there with a kid.
It can be pretty bad. It's a disturb. But see, that's like an elemental's more like that than it is like some kind of demon that you want to like assault. So, it really comes down to looking for the indicators, and I don't need a psychic for that. I think the only thing a psychic can help with that is if they validate what I'm already seeing. It's another indicator that says, okay, then we must have this right if they're seeing it too. But I don't just go in and be like, whatever the psychic tells me and says, okay, that's it, what it is. So if somebody is saying, like some psychic, I think that's what you guys said, right, Brandon, that some psychic said there's an elementals involved, I would take that with a grain of salt. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I mean, it is possible you could have like a comorbidity there. I mean, there can sometimes be two problems that are kind of combining to make it one giant one. I mean, you could have an elemental that is present at a location where something disturbing happened that created a projection of something that's malevolent, and then they're both kind of there. And I mean, that does happen. You know, elementals are everywhere. I mean, I got elementals on this property that I'm constantly fighting with. They're basically of the gremlin kind. They get into the technology, as you guys have probably seen. I really think they destroyed the hard drive. They destroyed my dishwasher. This week they destroyed my washing machine. Had to get a new one. They mess with the microwave. They turn it on. So when we go away for an extended period, we turn the circuit breaker off to everything, because everything but the security cameras and the alarm system generally, because we don't know what they're going to get into next. And if we're gone for a while, we come back, there's almost always something damaged or broken. This is one of the holiest places you could have. I mean, we're having mass here all the time. There's constant prayer going on in this house. This place has been blessed. Has not been sealed, but
I haven't done mine either.
A seal is not going to stop an elemental event either.
True. Yeah.
So, and this is definitely elemental. There's nothing malevolent here. There's nothing sentient, I should say intelligent here. Okay. It is literally like mosquitoes getting, into your face and biting your skin and causing you to be irritated. That's exactly.
You should always be cautious about saying there's nothing intelligent here.
Well,
on occasion.
I think you're putting yourself down.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm clever. I don't know if I'm truly intelligent. I think I'm just really clever sometimes. But I could be smarter. I mean, maybe if I wasn't so tired all the time, maybe I could actually impress myself sometimes.
I could be more disciplined.
More disciplined. That would help.
Yeah.
One of the holiest places. I didn't realize you were on the Temple Mount. Well, I mean,
that needs some reconsecrating. Let me tell you.
Well, I'll tell you this. From the vantage point of Christian theology, wherever the tabernacle is that houses the Eucharist, I mean, that is as holy as the Temple Mount. It is. I mean, it's the physical presence of God, in the same way that the temple was the physical presence, housed the physical presence of God. I think it's the real beauty of Christianity, is that now that can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in that one spot. It can be everywhere. It makes the place holy, but that doesn't, it doesn't scare off the elementals, and there's no interaction, because it's just a factor of creation. It's just a factor of creation. It doesn't really change.
But that's why we call it tabernacle, of course, the tent of meeting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We get it from the Holy of Holies. And even more further emphasized this is an interesting little tidbit for you guys about the Nicolaitan Catholic Church and why it has the Orthodox connections, even though it does a lot of Western things, is because the iconostasis creates a better representation of that Holy of Holies, that sanctuary space, that place that only, the clergy may enter, that kind of thing.
Oh, the Western Church had it. We had rood screens.
They got rid of it, though.
They opened it up.
Yeah. They opened it up.
Yeah.
Well, the extraordinary rite still has it. They still, those churches do, don't they?
Some Church of England's have them by virtue of the fact that the Reformation didn't get to them, and they're now scheduled ancient monuments, and getting rid of them is really not okay. So they do persist in Western Christianity, but I wish it were more ubiquitous.
Yeah, true. I would agree with that. I mean, I think but that's why we have an iconostasis. It's to really emphasize the fact that there's something tremendously holy here, and I take that very seriously. I do. I take that very seriously. you know, and it is the physical presence of God. I mean, what's holier than that? You know, what is holier than that? Do we have any other questions? Anything that is on anyone's mind that I missed?
Yes. So Danielle asked a question a bit back, kind of a two-parter. She said her brother decided one year to start collecting Hollywood celebrities' signed photos. He'd write them in a letter, and he'd get his photo and lovingly put in a clip frame and put it up on the wall. After the 32nd celebrity died, my parents begged him to stop. My question is, did her brother play a harbinger of doom to Hollywood for a year?
No.
I mean, no. That would be
Synchronicity?
That would be pushing it. I mean, yeah, that would be more of a synchronicity event. I wouldn't say that would be a.
If these are all Hollywood celebrities from the same era, I mean, roll the dice. They're going to be up in age and rolling off anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that would be more of a
disturbing coincidence.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we're back live. Let me go ahead. You know, it's because I forgot to isolate the bandwidth. See, that's one of the other frustrating things about the internet here is that I can isolate the bandwidth to this computer so that the stream is always given priority when there's a bandwidth disruption, but it only will hold the bandwidth for 2 hours. So I have to remember during the second break to isolate it again, and because this has been such a chaotic show and nothing's gone right, I should also say, because of that washing machine that was eaten by the gremlins, I had to be up at the crack of dawn today to be ready for the delivery of the new one. So I didn't get the normal sleep that I would have. So I've been up for more hours than I probably should be, which doesn't help anything either. Is anyone else experiencing an echo when Brandon talks?
Well, it was for both of us. I suspect it may have helped ended with what you just done, but
maybe it was it might have been
waiting
that.
for feedback.
Okay, yeah. Let me know if you're still hearing an echo from our from Father Chris or Brandon, because I'm not hearing an echo, but Levi, Tracy is too. Is it like a real is an echo in the sense of? I don't see.
Is it like feedback?
Yeah, I mean, help me to understand what you mean by echo, and maybe I can try to figure out what that could be. There's no other audio sources here.
Us.
It's both Father Chris. Has it been the entire show?
It was at the start, and then it wasn't for most of the show, and then it's come back.
From Zoom. From just Zoom, not from Jamie or myself.
That's those two?
That's right.
Interesting. I don't know what could be causing that. That tells me that it's a Zoom issue.
Could be.
Yeah. Just since the last break. Interesting. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing that's changed. That sounds like it could be an internet thing. I don't know.
They've got gremlins too.
Just Zoom. I don't know. Oh, sorry, guys. I mean, it's just craziness. Well, thank you. Riverboat, Father Firth, Mystic, thank you. We'll just plug along and hope that it happened a little bit before the last break. That's so strange. We don't hear it on our end. It's not disruptive?
No, okay. And over Zoom it's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, perfectly fine. You sound like as clear as you always do. And which is weird because you're coming through directly through the soundboard. So it's the same source now for everything. All the audio is through one source. It's not coming through like before. Like this will watch. You'll hear an echo now because I turned on that other microphone. But when I turn that off, the echo goes away, and that's because there's two audio sources when I turn that on. But Zoom doesn't have two audio sources, so I don't know what's going on.
It can't be Zoom. It must be somewhere between it coming into your laptop and going back out again to YouTube.
Weird. I don't know. It could be. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that internet's been really bad here lately. I've had to turn off the bandwidth to every device. There's 38 devices connected to this internet here. I've had to turn them all off except for my phone and this computer to make it work. And of course the security system. You know, it's been really difficult to try to get this internet to work, and the price of living out here in the country, sometimes I kind of regret it. I really do. I mean, I love the quiet, but I don't like this because I'm actually more stressed now than I was before I moved out here, because I moved out here to get less stressed, and I'm more stressed now because my job is all streaming now, and it's fighting a battle that I just don't seem to ever be able to win. And the only solution for it is to get Comcast, which would allow us to get a gigabyte of bandwidth, which would fix everything. But they want $30,000 to put the wire in.
Couldn't you just get Elon Musk's thing?
Yeah, Starlink.
I think there's too many trees. I don't think there's enough sky.
Ooh, I don't know. You could try it.
I mean, I don't know if I want to drill holes in the roof. Maybe if I put it on the roof, but I mean, I'd have to probably get someone to do that. I don't know. I know that would be 500 or better megabytes, which would
I think they promised 1,000 now.
1,000 now? Yeah, that would fix it. Yeah, Elon doesn't like me though, so he might cut my bandwidth back.
You don't know nothing about your account, Bishop.
Now we've mentioned his name, we're gonna, all sorts of terrible things are gonna happen.
Yeah, that's true. The synchronicity is gonna happen. Yeah, the synchronicity. Look out. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I mean, I'll try. I definitely think there's something weird going on with Zoom tonight, just because the video's not working correctly. Yeah. And we had Father Chris was having weird issues too. 1,000 gigabytes. No, I've got 50. Riverboat. I've got 50. That's 50 megabytes. That's as much as I can get out here. It's amazing. It's a miracle that I can get you a live stream at all. That's the fastest really I can get, unless I have pay Comcast $30,000 to put in a wire, because this property is about a quarter of a mile off the road. Okay. And, the Comcast has a wire on the road, but they just won't run one to this house. They want us to pay for it. And it's like, I don't want to be that committed to, even if I wanted to pay $30,000, which I don't want to be that committed to one company now, because I've invested so much into it. Because what if that sucks too? And now I've paid $30,000 for this wire that I don't even like the service of. So haven't been really terribly motivated. AT&T, which is our service here, the only one that we can get right now, unless we were to try Starlink. They said they've been looking at putting fiber in, but apparently they need to get some kind of law passed in order to do it. And legislation runs very slow in the state of Georgia. It's a very corrupt local government here. So who knows when that will ever get done? You think
I just had a thought.
What?
Have you thought of doing messages live from the retreat house? Would that have better internet?
Well, that would have Comcast, and that would be a last resort option, that when the retreat house is done and we have internet installed there, because now mass is being said from there, that would have access to a gigabyte. I mean, it would be a lot more expensive than what we pay now. So it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $360 a month, I think, for a gigabyte of Comcast. But that would be an option. Just get all the streaming out of here and put it over at the retreat house, because that does have Comcast there. It is an option, and we are going to get Comcast there for the mass. So that might be the way to do it. Move it out of here altogether and just be done with trying to stream here, because it's so difficult. But we'll see what we can do. I mean, I don't know. I would say, even if we had a person that was like, I'll donate $30,000 to do it. It's like, there's so many better things that $30,000 could go to.
$30,000 other than
rather than run a wire. So it's like, I don't really want to use church funds to put a wire in, when $30,000 could be revolutionary for doing other projects. That's so insignificant. I mean, that's the problem. And, then it comes back to, well, if I paid for it, then it's just like me paying money to work 60 hours a week. And I have a real problem where it's like a negative salary. It's like, I don't mind working for free. I do start to mind when it costs me to work. That does start to bother me. I've spent too many years in this job as a bishop, paying to do work. It was like, I think at one point it was like $20,000 a year just to do 60 hours a week. And that was me paying out of pocket to do this job. I don't think many people would do that. I think there's a special kind of insanity that comes with doing that. But even if somebody wanted to donate it, I don't think I'd spend it on that. Nobody's going to donate that. But even if they did, I would not probably recommend we put it towards a stupid wire. Kind of a waste of money, I think. Comcast should have a better option than that. I don't understand how it costs $30,000 to run a wire a quarter of a mile. That does not make sense to me. That seems very exploitive to me. But what do I know? Any other questions? Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any in the chat. Brandon, you got any for backup?
I don't see any in the chat, but of course I always have a backup.
I know you do.
We had one from email. I can do that later too.
Yes. So actually, here's a question. A pretty good one. When an exorcist does an exorcism, do they get possessed?
That's a common one. No, that does not happen. They can get like an obsession or an oppression, usually very temporary. Possession. If they get possessed, then they had no business doing the job, because that's usually the mark of somebody that really doesn't know what they're doing.
I suppose. Sorry, I should probably clarify. If what you mean by an exorcist is a priest who is an exorcist, the answer is no.
Right.
If it's somebody that's calling themselves an exorcist that has never been validly ordained as a priest,
well, that might be why it happened.
The answer is
possible. No, because there's a lot of things going on in the priesthood that would be safeguards against this. So first of all, the sacrament of holy orders being the primary thing. All right, the ability to act legitimately and validly in persona Christi is going to negate any risk factor in that regard, right? Because the priest is operating with Christ's authority, and he has the sacramental authority to do so. So that in itself is more than sufficient to prevent a priest from becoming possessed by something. He's not there to be vulnerable to it. So that gets us to the second issue, or the second reason, is that an exorcist is trained in how to handle these matters, not to become vulnerable to them. So when you hear these, some priests going through these lengthy fastings and days of prayer to get ready for an exorcism, these are things that priests do and can do to strengthen themselves spiritually, so that they can more completely act in the authority of Christ. However, for me, who tends to suffer greatly from hypoglycemia, I find, going into an exorcism on a full stomach to be the better course of action. It gives me the strength. I usually eat a lot of protein, so it makes me more aggressive. If I'm feeling full and satisfied, I'm usually feeling very, confidently enough to be able to handle just about anything. So that's my strategy. But again, I mean, these aren't like hard, fast rules. It's whatever works for you. But there are things that priests are trained to do to be able to not become vulnerable. However, that being said,
attacks can happen though. We've seen that.
There's usually
it comes after your eyes.
Yes,
I've been vexated.
It's vexation. Usually vexation,
but
where
you just muscle through it.
Yeah, it clouds you. They'll try to like distort your ability to say the prayers. Yeah. We've experienced that. Any priest who does this work has experienced that. You
remember your first.
You get really, really tired and a bit distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Like
kind
of,
the words start to run together and you can't focus.
Like I remember one time we couldn't even remember the St. Michael's prayer.
Yeah, it stuttered. I stuttered through it.
It's
one of the Ghost Adventures episodes. I think the one in Vegas.
Yeah.
I know it by heart, but I was stuttering through it when everybody was being attacked.
Well, we say it every mass,
except us.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Everyone. Yeah.
But so that does happen.
So you're not.
And that's why I think you said about. For me, that's the chief thing to combat is that like brain fog.
Yeah,
it's vexation.
And I think that's why the discipline came to fast, because for most people, not everyone's got their own physiology.
Clears their head.
When I fast, I get a clear head.
Yeah,
but you're right. If you eat protein, it doesn't affect that. If I had sugar, carbs,
you get cloudy.
Wreck.
Yeah.
Wreck.
No, we do high protein.
Give me a huge steak.
Yeah.
And I'll be good to go.
That'd be fine.
We do high protein, but fasting. I mean,
carbs.
if I have a hypoglycemic attack in the middle of an exorcism, that would not be a good thing.
That'd be good. No.
So I know.
But for me, for me, being in ketosis is the best way, and either you do that through fasting or by only eating, not eating any carbohydrates.
That's right. Yeah. So there's the answer to that. Okay, so no, it should not happen. And if it does, it's because you're probably not qualified to do the work.
You mean watching some YouTube videos and calling yourself an exorcist doesn't work?
Yeah. And that's exactly why they shouldn't. You know, people are like, and
online ordination doesn't work either.
Yeah, right. No. We've had that.
We've had some interesting cases come up in the last couple of weeks.
The people, people
inquiries that
inquiries.
Just like, man.
It's like, look, I recognize a person's interest in wanting to help people spiritually.
Absolutely.
But when you come to this church and say you want to be a part of it, you want to join the clergy or whatever, just because you want to be recognized as an exorcist, you'll never be accepted into this program, because you are a pastor first. An exorcist is probably the last thing that you are in this church.
It should be a 0.01% of your ministry.
Yeah.
If at all, I mean, I know it's become falsely big because there are so few exorcists around, and the church hasn't taken it seriously for 40, 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
But really, I have done exorcisms. I'm trained as an exorcist. The vast majority of my priesthood has been, mass, preaching, teaching, baptisms, funerals, weddings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's the normal thing.
Community work. Yeah, that's what I do.
Right.
So that's the 99.9% of what you do. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not called to that, you're not called to anything else.
You can't be called to exorcism and not be called to be a priest first and be able to do all of the ordinary things that people need, because most of the time, that's all that's necessary to solve a problem spiritually. Exorcism's almost never needed. Exorcism's last resort. The sacrament of unction pretty much fixes almost anything. And what unction doesn't do, confession does. So it's really very simple. And if you don't know or understand those things, exorcism, becoming an exorcist, nobody ever should want that. You are given that authority when there's a need, but you're called to priesthood. And if the church calls you to be an exorcist, that's something different. But it calls priests to be exorcists. People don't be like, I want to be a priest so I could be an exorcist. That's ridiculous. And that's not going to fly in this church.
Marina's just asked a question which I find a quick answer, but I think it's probably worth developing.
Yeah, let's go with it.
So she's doing RTIA at the moment, and one of the priests was teaching about the Mass and mentioned when he puts on his garments, his former identity disappears. Is this the moment of transition to in persona Christi? So I've just given a quick answer, which is to say no, that's when you're ordained.
In persona Christi is forever. Yeah, and it's
and in fact, one could say it's for all the baptized, right? The baptismal priesthood.
I mean, it is in a way. You could say that, but I mean, specifically when the church says in persona Christi, it is referring to the priesthood as a singular function. But
of course,
if I'm walking through an airport and I'm just dressed in like I am now in a t-shirt, and somebody says, "Oh, look, aren't you Bishop Bryan on Ghost Adventures?" And I say, "Yes." And they're like, "Would you mind hearing my confession? I don't have my stole. I don't have vestments. I don't have anything." I can still hear their confession and absolve them because I still am in persona Christi in that moment. I don't need to be dressed like it to do it. But being dressed in it liturgically is to emphasize in that unique liturgical way that this is Christ. That is why we wear the vestments, to distinguish. So you're not seeing me up there. You shouldn't be like, "Oh, there's the bishop." You should be like, "No, that's in persona Christi. That's Jesus here present with us, and the priest is acting in that capacity throughout this mass." So
there is another function of the vest. I mean, obviously, vestments have got biblical origins. They've all got symbolic meaning. You know, we could go through them if you want. But the real basic function of wearing vestments is that it means that because a priest has to be visible at the mass, by wearing vestments, it removes the element of personality. So, you know, I had this, I think I've mentioned this on the show years ago. I also have mentioned it on the show before, and I forget I've been on the show for years. So most people haven't ever heard these things. But, you know, when I first came to exercise ministry as a priest in Australia, a member of the parish who I dearly love said, "Oh, do you have to wear all those things?" You know, and I said, "Well, what would you rather I wore?" And he said, "Oh, you can wear a suit." And I said, "So shall I wear a Kmart suit or a Versace suit?"
Right.
Now that is a Father Chris response if I've ever heard one.
For that raised eyebrow.
He had exactly the same response you just had. He laughed, and then he said, "You carry on," because really he didn't need me. He knew what those vestments represented.
Of course,
it was a little test to see if I knew why I wore them. You know, and that answer, I think, satisfied him. But it is the point. Is that and then listen, hey, we all know, especially clergy know, your choice of vestments is a little bit like that too. You know, you can wear Gammarelli, or you can wear polyester ones. So there is. I don't want to claim to be holier than thou. You know, I do enjoy wearing nice vestments, but. But nevertheless, it's still a choice of which kind of priest clothes are you going to wear, as opposed to, are you the height of fashion? Are you rich? Are you poor? Are you?
Well, that's the funny thing about vestments is that they have quite a bit of, just like the Kmart suit or Versace.
Yeah,
they have that much variation. You could spend $30,000 on one vestment if you really wanted to, or you
I
could
can sell one to you if you want, just for the advert for the show. If anyone wants to buy one for $30,000, I do.
There you go.
Know a manufacturer that will make them with real pearls on and all sorts.
There you go. And you can get one for $50 on Autumn. I mean, it's and they both are valid. They both work.
Of course,
it doesn't really come down to the price you pay or how nice they are. It's really just what your parish supports is generally how it tends to go. And sometimes if a priest is well financed, he might buy better ones or that kind of thing. But they're not necessary.
Well, and also, by the way, just so as to, because I think there's a real sin in saying that the cheapest must be the holiest and the best.
Yeah,
that's not true.
No,
it suffices to say that these things are a gift from God, and if you're worshipping in a community that can't afford to buy the best vestments, it doesn't matter. Those vestments are fine. But it's also true, and this is one I've said this here because Australians are generally not poor. It does not do to sort of have this pompous attitude towards priests must wear cheap and awful things. Mm-hmm. If when you go home as a member of the parish, you're sitting on a $20,000 couch watching a $10,000 television, and you have artwork on around your house that costs thousands of dollars, and you travel business class when you go on holiday. And it's not about some vestments are better than others. It's about, if you are from a rich part of the world, they should be giving their first fruits to God. not the cast-offs. So
see, that's the
so
problem.
It works both ways.
That's...
In a poor area, the humblest, you could wear sackcloth and ashes and it's sufficient.
The problem I have seen...
But if you are wealthy, that should also be reflected.
The problem I have seen throughout my entire ministry, and even before I was affiliated with this church, even in the conventional Roman Catholic Church, okay, the one thing I have seen is that people tend to give with their charity what is expendable. They don't want to feel their charity. They just want to feel good about themselves that they gave something, but they typically will never give more than they won't feel. And that is the exact opposite of how it's supposed to work. The exact opposite. God is supposed to be your first obligation, then all of your other things. But that's not how people see it. They see it as, I got to take care of all these things that are important to me first, and then whatever's left over, I'll give to God. That's very inverted. That it goes against everything. And that's exactly why the Acts of the Apostles, has that little socialist twist in the beginning there that people, sometimes erroneously equate with socialism. But it sounds socialist because it sounds almost like they're Smurfs, they're all like living in common in some commune and everyone's sharing the money. And, you come in, you give everything to the leaders and they distribute it out equally to everyone, But the reason for that was to emphasize the importance of God being first. And I was talking with Jamie before. We're trying to get this mission church. We're trying to get this retreat house off the ground, getting the chapel done so it's ready to use. And I've been having a hell of a time trying to find a product that will finish the chapel in a way that looks appropriate but isn't too cheap. And ideally, what I basically want is there's some kind of stonework effect in the chapel so that it kind of has a bit of a medieval look. I want it to feel otherworldly. That's the purpose of church, it shouldn't feel like a room. It shouldn't feel like just a room in your house. It should feel like another place. And the way that you can achieve this is in churches, they use stained glass to create a different kind of light, a different color. And then of course the ordained, the displays of ornate displays is what I'm trying to say, are to capture your eye and remind you that you are in another place, that you're in the presence of something holy and divine. It's just a way of playing on your psychology. But the churches I grew up in, when I was a kid, were churches that were built in the 1800s. And these were places that were all Italian marble, gold leaf on the ceiling, remarkable places. And these were built because back then people understood their obligation to God, that it came first, you could not house the Eucharist in something that was like anywhere, any old place. It should be something special, something unique to indicate that you see that God deserves something better than you. But that's not how people look at it today. And today it's like God gets whatever's left and he'll understand. That's the attitude now. So what we're forced to deal with, because this is a pervading attitude, is, I'm trying to figure out a way to make this look nice without it looking like a freaking circus in there. And it's been hard. It's been really hard. We're realizing now that we're just going to have to put something in that is adequate. And then hopefully as time goes on and hopefully better financing happens, we can then replace some of what we're going to put in with actual stone so that it does become a place that is appropriate to house the Eucharist. Because, it's as the bishop, it's hard for me to put the Eucharist in a room that is something that nobody would want to live in. I mean, would you do this? Would you put this in your house? Would you want your house to look like this? The answer would probably be no. So, we've been doing these basement churches kind of thing. We've been doing these small little room churches without windows. We've been doing commercial shopping mall churches. And, when does that end? Well, so far it hasn't, because people do not understand that God is not that thing you pay for when you got a little money left in your back pocket and you can throw it that direction. So this is a problem, that it goes beyond $30,000 investments. It's something that fundamentally as a society we don't understand anymore. That's how we had marvelous churches like Notre Dame 1,000 years ago, and now we have places that you look at, you can't even tell it's a church anymore. It's drywall and concrete, and nobody cares, and they think that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's the work that the people do that matters. No, it is the physical presence of God. I think he deserves a place that's nicer than your home. Don't you? I do. But I mean, I don't know, so I'm trying to do the best, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel like I need to do penance for this entire church, because I feel like we're really not living up to the standard here that we should be. And I hope that changes down the road. But it's tough when you only have a handful of people that actually support the ministry, and a lot of people that just ride the coattails of those who do. And it's sometimes the people that have the least are the ones that are given the most, and it shouldn't be that way either. It's a conundrum. I mean, it's something that I'm working through, and it's something I've been working through for more than 30 years. It's ministry in America today.
We just got a quick question, which I think you'll be able to get to.
JK.
Yeah, I'm rambling now, so get me off on it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. JK asks, I have a question about confession. So when you go into the booth for confession, is it soundproof? And why do you have to go into a confession booth to confess? So
you don't have to go into a confession booth. It's really for your privacy. It's just so that you feel more comfortable. In the Orthodox Church, they don't use them. Actually, in the Orthodox Church, you go up to the iconostasis, and the priest puts his stole over you, and you kneel down, and everybody just knows that when that's happening to stay away. But no, the confession is just a way of making people more comfortable, because the church knows nobody wants to do this. So they're definitely not going to want to do it if there's any chance that anybody could hear or know what they're saying. So I wouldn't say they're not soundproof in like a radio studio kind of way. But they are very quiet. I mean, you can't really
cozy, private and cozy, and
no one can hear you.
Just,
I mean,
they have to be,
and also
right
because
the door.
Because everybody knows that's what's going on there.
They respect.
People don't kneel next to it in prayer listening.
Right. It's usually far away. Yeah.
Because that could be you in there next time.
Yeah. So.
And the other thing is that the seal of the confessional is bound on the priest, the penitent, and anyone
else
who
hears. Yeah. That's another thing people don't understand. Yeah. Because it is.
If the cleaner hears your confession and talks about it, they are in mortal sin and in danger of hell unless they confess that.
I mean,
fact, it's a grave sin.
It is.
I think it's one of those that you might even.
It's mortal
maybe a priest can't even instantly confess without consulting.
Yeah, I think a bishop has to handle that one. I do. It's not excommunication, I don't think, but it is definitely a bishop has to probably deal with it.
I can't remember the term for it. There's a term they give for it. I can't remember what it is.
We had a client once that Jamie was primarily the contact for. She did most of the pastoral work with this client. I was really just the sacramental support, but she was the one that did the day-to-day talking to this individual. It came through in the course of my investigation that what was really needed here was a confession, and he was uncomfortable going in there with me. So he asked if Jamie could come with him. And I basically explained that, there's no problem here, but I explained that, anything that is revealed that Jamie is bound to the same way that I am to this seal. We cannot discuss at all the contents of your confession. And she can't either. And I made sure that she already understood that, but you affirm it again because it is an irregular thing. But we did it recently, had a minor female who wanted me to hear her confession. And I don't hear minor females in private. In a church, I would. If I had a big church with confessionals, I probably would do it. But
even here in the churches, the children go in the confessional, but the doors are kept open.
Yeah, doors are kept open. Yeah, so
I've sat with them.
So Jamie came just because out of decorum, just so that there's never any question that no accusations can come, because there were two witnesses there to know that everything was appropriate, and you have to be careful like that today, because people get mad at me a lot when I don't do instant messages. I have my instant messages turned off. People are constantly trying to connect with me. They always want to do instant messages. I do not do instant messages. And the reason for that is liability reasons, okay? I don't want anyone to say that I said something about something in writing that they either fabricated or whatever to make it look like it was from an instant message they had with me, when it is so much easier for me to say, well, that's not possible for you to have that because I don't do instant messages. I don't send them. So whatever that is and I have to universally say that to everybody. I mean, universally, there's no instant messages because I don't send instant messages. The only instant message I have was with church staff, and that's it. That's on Signal. Okay, that's not even on our own network. I have that shut off. And that's why I don't do it, because people will make up shit and try to mess up your life. And being on TV and a public person and in a controversial work like religion, you have to protect yourself. Then you add to it, Ghost Adventures, and then you get the people that absolutely despise and are jealous of Zach, and then that rubs into my life because they get mad at me, or they think that, we hate Zach, so we must hate him too because he likes Zach, and it's I just, no. Instant messages, no, not doing them.
Yeah, there are definitely some nutters out there.
There are, I mean, it's a tough situation, and I've had to be. I mean, it wasn't like that in the beginning. I didn't operate like this before. I mean, I've had to become more distant just to protect my family, because people have imposed. Jamie knows, okay, when we started this church, I should say, when the church was really starting to take off, right before my first episode of Ghost Adventures, and that's when Jamie was coming on. We had a very large, a rather relatively large community for the size church that it was. And I can't even begin to tell you the problems and the drama that would go on that was so unnecessary and so frustrating that, I mean, Jamie and I would be there in the office banging our heads against the wall. Like, when does this end? When will this ever stop? Because it was so ridiculous, the things that would happen and the petty little arguments. And it's just, eventually I was just like, you know what, I'm done with it. And eventually retracted.
Stiff-necked people, as Moses said. Stiff-necked
people. It was. I identify so much with that.
Yeah.
Because every now and then that comes up in the lectionary, and I'm like, I always laugh. I always giggle because it's like, oh, well, this is it. I get this one. This is one all pastors get this, but I really get this because I've lived this, But that's the way it is. Any other questions? Anything coming in? I haven't been reading the chat.
I think I'm going to have to shoot off. We're over the hour. I've got a meeting to get to.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to continue on
please do.
We still got 15 minutes, and that's just because we started so late. So I'm going to complete the 15 minutes, but you're welcome.
Despite the trials, it's really good to be back on, and
it is,
and good to spend some time with
I know I bitch and complain and everything else, but I really do like this show. I love this audience. Okay. I really enjoy our people. I really do. So I'm always happy to be able to bring this show to you. I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel there was value here. Of course, you're such an intrinsic part of it, Father. So thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless. Take care. So, Brandon, did you see another one? We can probably take maybe one or two more questions if you see any.
I didn't see any in the chat, but I do have more backup.
Let's go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
So, since we're on a similar topic of exorcisms, one of our members had read a book where it was talking about exorcisms taking days to complete. Is that true with fallen angel demons or just exorcisms in general?
I mean, it could be any. I mean, there's no definitive rule there. You could have an exorcism that's not finding its origin in a fallen demon, a fallen angel rather, and it's still could take days or even weeks or months. And then you could have a fallen angel that you can resolve in one shot. A lot of it depends upon the willingness of the victim to take the grace of Christ into their life. And unfortunately, most of the time, the people that we end up seeing, because remember, this church tries to help everyone. The Roman Catholic Church typically reserves these rights for their own members. So when the Roman Catholic Church deals with exorcism, they're usually dealing with somebody that is already part of a family and a parish. And they can go to that family and they have background there. The pastor might even know them. They might have known them for a long time. And so there's history there. They're not going to typically take cases off the street like we do. So the people we tend to get are people that are forced to come to us because they can't get help from conventional churches since they have no relationship with them. And that is already, and this is perhaps why, or I should say the main reason why the Roman Catholic Church, likely, I don't know for sure what their reasoning is. I mean, but I think one of the main ones would be that the prognosis is very poor. When a person already doesn't have an established relationship with Christ and probably doesn't even want one, but now is just coming for help because now they're desperate. And how many times, Jamie, did you see? This was, again, we were talking about the mission church, and I don't want to get back on that negative train, but, the mission church, we spent like $50,000 of very precious benefactor monies, because back then that was a lot to this church.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the be all and end all, right? The church had nothing. So we did not have the donations we're having coming in today. And not that I'm saying we have a whole lot coming in, but we had a whole lot less going in then. And so using that money to get a commercial property for 2 years, because the rent was, between rent and everything we needed to get it going, was about $25,000 a year, which is a lot to spend on a church that, people were barely giving $5 in the collection basket. It was insane. But the whole idea was, let's get a place where we can inspire people to come. So when people come to us, we know they're not going to be affiliated with any church. We know they haven't been going. We know they need to go because this is likely how the problem started in the first place. And they could come here, and then this could become their family. So what would happen? What would happen is that they'd come, we'd solve their problem, and then we'd never see them again. That was it. Bye.
And then 6 months later, they're sending in a new intake saying the problem's back.
Yeah, you did what you did didn't work. It's like, no, what you didn't do didn't work. That's what happened. Okay, that's why you're in this situation. So
you got your prescription. You didn't take the medicine.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, exorcism is so much like being a doctor, okay? It's like you're only as good as your patient's willingness to actually change their life. So if you have a person that's a chronic smoker, and is developing emphysema, some kind of lung cancer, whatever, and you're like saying, look, you're in stage 1, we can fix this, but you got to have to give up smoking. Otherwise, this is eventually going to kill you. And, so you do the operation, you perform all this expensive work, maybe you even do stuff, pro bono, and they don't give it up, and then the problem worsens. It's like, what can you do for a person like that? Nothing. So the reason why sometimes exorcisms take years is because you're dealing with the resistance of the person, not the strength of a demon, but the resistance of a person to take the grace of Christ in. They just won't have it for whatever reason. Sometimes it's not apathy. Most of the time it is in our work because of the kinds of people that, unaffiliated people, Christians that are not Christians, and people that don't desire a church life. That's apathy. But, sometimes like in the Roman Catholic Church, where you do have people that are receiving sacraments and they're living the Christian life like normal, sometimes they are just self-haters. And they just don't feel that they're worthy of Christ's grace. And so it's kind of almost like a type of psychological complex where they just feel so guilty for being a sinner or whatever they might have done that they won't let the grace of Christ come in and heal them from the affliction.
I don't deserve his grace.
Yeah.
I'm nothing. The things I've done, he won't forgive.
Yeah.
Hear it all the time.
All the time. So, it's kind of like that's going to be your primary factors when looking at the time frame for a resolution. So you can't say, well, it's just because it's fallen angel, they're harder to get rid of. Yes, they are. They are. Because typically what we call fallen angels only attaches to people that are really good targets. Okay, they don't typically waste their time on something that isn't going to be a good prize for them. So, that's kind of another factor, maybe an extraneous variable that comes into play when you're looking at what might be the prognosis here. But it is what it is. And spiritual apathy is, for us, is the biggest problem we see. They don't want church life. They don't want Christian obligation. They don't want to support a church. They don't want to donate to a church. So they don't want any of that. All they want is make me feel better. And when you do, you don't see them again until they start feeling bad again. And we eventually put an end to that. We in the earlier days, we'd try and we'd work with them, and we were patient. My patience has run much more thin. And
we've got just too many cases.
Too many cases, but also I think a little jaded, if I dare say, a little jaded, because you eventually, I think, has anyone ever studied? Has anyone ever studied Erik Erikson in psychology? Have you ever studied Erik Erikson?
Only Erik
Brandon?
Erikson I know is the podcaster, conservative guy.
Yeah.
So nope.
He was a psychoanalyst. He was Danish and Danish-German psychoanalyst. He came up with stages of life, and what basically is like at different points in a person's development, they will have basically a fork in the road. And there's a path that they can go to assimilate that will lead towards a successful direction. And then there's a path where if they go the path that's not healthy, then they tend to have problems subsequently as they go on. And when you reach the stage of life that I'm in, the most important thing for people my age is to be able to look at the work that they've done and feel intrinsically that their life had value, because you reach a stage where it's like the last stage to the end. There's only one more stage after this in Erikson's model, and that is basically the elderly stage, where you kind of look back at life and decide whether or not you were successful, and you'll either be contented by the fact that your life was successful, or you'll look back and be despondent because it wasn't. In my stage, you're in that shadowy realm where what you're actively participating in has to bring intrinsic fulfillment. Otherwise, you start to feel like your life is meaningless. This is actually the origin point to the midlife crisis that tends to happen for people in their late 40s, early 50s. It's caused by a disconnect that happens where they just feel like their life hasn't brought the meaning that they had wanted. And for me, it's interesting because it's like doing this work has been such a mixed bag. It's like there's a handful of people that I know their lives have been changed by this church. And then there's another handful, probably even a larger group, of people that their lives have been changed by this church that have never even told me. I find out around. Yeah, integrity versus despair stage. Thank you, Marina. I knew that somebody out there knew what I was talking about. I couldn't remember what it was. It's been too many years since I studied psychology. I've been talking on more than 3 decades now. Yeah, I had to think. Yeah. But what was I saying? I forgot. I've lost my train of thought. But I was just talking about, that you get into this the handful of people. That's what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. There's a group that I'll probably never know about that have been changed by this church, but when you're dealing with these apathetic people, and that's what you're seeing, and that's what you're actively involved with over and over and over again, you really start to feel like your life has no meaning anymore. And that's been the hardest part for me. And I have to reel myself back in, because the interesting thing is that the internet, the people on the internet, the people that find me and become part of this community, people like Brandon, in fact, find me, and he didn't find me through Ghost Adventures, which is a blessing, because it's like he found me for the right reasons. Not that you guys that found me on Ghost Adventures found me for the wrong. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that, sometimes we get people that just are fanboying for the show, and they're like, they see me as one step away from getting to meet Zach. I know most of our people are not like that, but there are a lot of people that don't last too long when they realize that I'm not going to culminate that. But Brandon had no knowledge of this at all. He came in with a completely different mindset, and that led to I realized that he was getting value out of this, and there's a lot of people like him that do and did, and so that reaffirms. But so it's like my internet people, the people I don't get to see and talk to all the time, are the ones that I remember that this is what I'm doing it for. But I don't feel that as much, because it's like words on a screen most of the time. That's why I do this show a lot, because it's like, it makes it a little bit more real. I can talk to you. If you guys call me, most of you don't call me, so I don't really get to know you at all. But then at the other side of the coin, that's why we did the retreat house. I was hoping that, maybe people will come. We can make this more tangible. But unfortunately, when we did the mission church, they only wanted to take. They didn't want to give, and they didn't want to be a part of anything. They were just wasting my time, and that's very, very discouraging. From any point of view. I don't care who you are. You don't even have to be a Christian or a pastor to understand that. Think of any job where basically you're not appreciated, and you're not valued. It's hard to continue to work. Something I struggle with every day. Anyway, next week we're going to be dealing with what was it? Oh, the reality, the simulation theory. Yes, that's next week. Theory. Tuesday at 8 p.m. Brandon, thank you. Jamie, thank you.
Yep.
And thank all of you for being with us tonight. I'm sorry for the problems, but you know what?
Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, thanks for sticking through it. I promise to make the show better this season. It won't be as chaotic as it was today. I will do my best. We got some very interesting guests different topics this season. All new ones. We don't have any return guests this season so far. All new ones. Okay, so you don't want to miss anything coming up, and hopefully we'll have all these bugs worked out by the time they come on. That's why I didn't schedule any guests for the first 2 episodes. I knew this was going to be a challenge. Yep. All right. Well, anyway, we'll see you next week. Take care. God bless, and I will see you out there in the ether.
Everybody.